Naomi King always dreamed of becoming a great violinist, even though every step she took on that stage was met with sneers and stinging insults. Born to a devoted janitor named Robert King, who worked tirelessly at the prestigious academy for over a decade, Naomi grew up with little more than an old, battered violin patched together with tape and glue, a treasure that symbolized her hope amid a world full of cruelty. Every time she stepped forward, the hall would fill with mocking whispers from those who looked down on her. Wealthy, privileged students in crisp uniforms would exchange nasty remarks, and even her former friend Emily Walker, the mayor's daughter with icy green eyes, sneered as if Naomi's very existence was a joke. Despite the pain and constant prejudice, Naomi's spirit grew stronger with every degrading comment. In the quiet hours after class, when the sun dipped below the horizon casting long shadows across the school's hallways, she would slip into the dusty music room. There, alone with her cherished violin, she poured out her grief, her hopes, and her simmering determination into each note. Those notes became her secret conversation with the universe, a call for justice and a promise of revenge against a system that had long favored the few over the many. When the annual talent show was announced, the air was electric with excitement, yet Naomi sensed a trap behind the facade of celebration. Ms. Helen Harper, the school's celebrated yet ruthless music teacher, known for favoring affluent white students, declared Naomi would perform. In a tone so deceptively sweet it barely concealed her disdain, she let the announcement hang in the air. "Naomi King, please come up and show us what you can do," she said, her words laced with malice. The auditorium, filled with dozens of onlookers measuring success in dollars and pedigree, buzzed with a mixture of curiosity and contempt. Standing on stage in her worn-out sneakers that barely measured up to the polished floors of the auditorium, Naomi felt her heart pounding like a drum at a county fair. The weight of every unkind word, every sneer from Ms. Harper and Emily Walker pressed on her shoulders. But, as she raised her fragile bow to the trembling strings of her violin, something shifted inside her. With that first note, a sound as delicate as a whisper yet as defiant as a battle cry, Naomi transformed the stage into an arena of retribution. Her melody, rich with sorrow and simmering anger, spoke of every tear shed in lonely, dark corners of the school. Each note was a declaration. No longer would she be the victim of injustice. As her music swelled, so did the air of inevitability. The audience, including a cadre of older, kind-hearted souls who remembered a time when fairness mattered, listened in awe as the room's cold atmosphere melted into stunned silence. In that electrifying moment, Naomi King was no longer just the poor girl with the broken violin. She was a force of nature, delivering a comeback so grand it promised to shatter the walls of prejudice forever. Naomi King stood on that grand stage with a quiet dignity that belied the storm raging within her. As the last note of her soulful melody lingered in the air like a tender tear, a hush fell over the audience that had once reveled in her humiliation. Even Emily Walker and her clique, who had so arrogantly scoffed at the sight of the self-taught girl with a battered violin, now stood frozen, with eyes wide in disbelief. Under the stage lights, Naomi's performance had transformed the old, patched instrument into a vessel of raw emotion and unyielding strength. In that moment, the cruelty that had plagued her life melted away as her music spoke the truth of every injustice she had endured. Across the room, Robert King, her devoted father and janitor for over a decade at Ashwood High, watched with a swelling pride and tearful eyes. He had long toiled in silence, burdened by the weight of discrimination that kept his daughter in the shadows. Now, as Naomi's notes soared, he finally saw the glimmer of the bright future she deserved. The music grew stronger with every measured stroke of the bow, echoing a declaration that Naomi was not a joke, nor was she a mistake. It was as if each note carried the promise of retribution against a society that had scorned her for the color of her skin and the modesty of her background. When the final resonant note faded into a heavy silence, Naomi slowly lowered her bow. Her heart pounded like a runaway train on a hot summer day, and she nervously scanned the auditorium for a sign of approval. What she found instead was a sea of astonished faces. Once harsh and scornful, now softened by a dawning realization of her brilliance. For a fleeting moment, the contempt that had once stained the eyes of her classmates and teachers was replaced by a mix of admiration and even a hint of remorse. Yet Naomi wondered silently if this unexpected applause would ever be enough to dismantle the deep-seated prejudices that had defined their lives. The weight of the moment pressed upon her as the silence deepened, broken only by a tentative clap from the back of the room. That initial applause soon swelled into a thunderous wave that filled the entire auditorium, accompanied by whistles and exuberant cheers. It was the first time Naomi had ever experienced such a warm embrace from an audience that had once ridiculed her. Among the clapping hands was that of Mr. Gregory Harris, the elderly history teacher known for his stoic nature, whose rare smile now shone with genuine admiration. Amid this overwhelming celebration, Naomi felt a gentle hand on hers. Turning, she saw her father, Robert King, emerging from behind the stage curtains. His eyes glistened with unspoken pride and deep emotion as he stepped up beside her. In a soft, trembling voice that carried the weight of years of sacrifice, he whispered, "My daughter, today you have shown them all who you truly are." In that tender moment, Naomi's heart swelled with relief and a newfound confidence. For the first time in her life, she realized that she was no longer alone in her fight against a system built on cruelty and narrow-mindedness. Yet, just as the applause began to subside and the warm glow of victory filled the room, the atmosphere shifted dramatically. From behind the stage wings, Miss Helen Harper, the school's revered yet ruthless music teacher, reappeared. Her footsteps echoed sharply across the wooden floor, and her eyes, once smug with self-assured superiority, now burned with a cold, steely confusion and doubt. Standing before Naomi, Miss Harper's voice rang out clearly, intended for all to hear. "Naomi King, please answer honestly. Who taught you to play like that?" Her words, laced with icy contempt, sent a ripple of tension through the gathered crowd. The question hung in the air as whispers spread like wildfire among the students. Emily Walker, sitting in the front row, watched Naomi with an odd mixture of satisfaction and hidden hope, expecting her to falter under the weight of suspicion. The elegant facade that Miss Harper had maintained so long began to crumble, revealing a bitter vulnerability masked by years of prejudice. Naomi, though momentarily taken aback by the sudden confrontation, met Miss Harper's steely gaze with calm resolve. In a clear, steady voice that resonated with the quiet power of her journey, she replied, "Miss Harper, no one taught me. I taught myself everything I know." She continued, her voice gaining strength. "I learned from the old music CDs my father kept and from free videos on the internet, because I never had the money to afford formal lessons." That simple, honest confession sent shockwaves through the auditorium. A profound silence descended as every ear absorbed the truth of Naomi's words. Even the proud faces of the wealthy students softened into expressions of disbelief, while Emily's own features flushed with an unmistakable blend of embarrassment and regret. Miss Harper's eyes flickered with a mixture of anger, shame, and a painful self-reproach. She had long believed that a child from a humble background, especially a black girl like Naomi, could never possibly match the refined training of her favored elite students. Now, confronted with the undeniable evidence of Naomi's talent and determination, that misguided belief was brutally shattered. In the charged silence that followed, Naomi felt something stir deep within her, a resolve that was not just about personal vindication, but a desire for grand retribution against every slight and sneer she had ever suffered. She realized then that her performance was not merely a display of musical skill, but a clarion call for justice. The echoes of her self-taught melody had not only silenced prejudice for a moment, but had ignited a spark that would soon blaze into a full-scale revolution against discrimination and cruelty. Over the following days, the impact of Naomi's performance rippled far beyond the walls of Ashwood High. Local newspapers featured her story, and television interviews began to air, celebrating her as a symbol of resilience and hope in the face of systemic injustice. Her tale resonated deeply with many, especially with those who had once felt marginalized and silenced. Invitations poured in from community centers and music festivals across the country, each event promising a platform for Naomi to share her art and her message of defiance against bigotry. It was during one particularly crisp autumn evening, in a grand concert hall measured in thousands of square feet and filled with elegantly dressed patrons, that Naomi decided to stage her ultimate act of retribution. The venue, adorned with red velvet seats and golden chandeliers, buzzed with anticipation as word spread that Naomi King would perform a piece she had composed, a symphony born from the depths of her struggle and her triumph. That night, as the audience settled into their seats, the atmosphere was charged with an electric mix of expectation and awe. Naomi took the stage with a quiet confidence that belied the years of torment she had endured. As she began to play, her music soared with an intensity that seemed to shake the very foundations of the concert hall. Every note was a powerful rebuke to those who had once belittled her, and every crescendo was a declaration of her newfound authority. The performance reached a fevered pitch when Naomi seamlessly wove together melodies of sorrow, defiance, and hope into a grand tapestry of sound that left the audience breathless. It was as if her violin was speaking directly to the hearts of everyone present, urging them to stand against injustice and embrace the beauty of resilience. In that unforgettable performance, the applause that erupted was not just a tribute to musical brilliance, it was a resounding act of collective defiance against the oppressive forces of racism and elitism. Even Miss Harper, who had once wielded her authority with cruel precision, could no longer hide her internal turmoil. Her reputation, once bolstered by a veneer of refined superiority, crumbled in the face of a community united by the power of Naomi's art. The shame on her face was palpable, a stark reminder that prejudice and cruelty have no place in a society that values truth and beauty. Naomi King's triumphant return to the stage marked the beginning of a new era. She transformed her personal pain into a mission to empower others like her. With the funds raised from her concerts, she established a scholarship program for underprivileged musicians, ensuring that future generations would not be denied the opportunity to express themselves through music simply because of their background. Her act of retribution was not one of revenge born out of bitterness, but a graceful turning of tables, a demonstration that true strength lies in compassion, perseverance, and the unwavering belief in one's own worth. In the years that followed, Naomi's legacy grew as she continued to challenge and change the system that had once sought to silence her. Her story became a beacon for all those who had been marginalized, inspiring countless others to rise above their circumstances and claim their rightful place in the spotlight. And though the scars of the past would forever remain, they served as a powerful reminder of the transformation that had taken place on that fateful day at Ashwood High. A day when a humble girl with an old violin taught a community to listen with their hearts and to stand up against injustice. For anyone who had ever doubted the power of a determined spirit, Naomi King's journey was a testament to the truth that even in the darkest of times, the light of talent and resilience can break through the deepest shadows, leaving the world forever changed and its critics rendered speechless in the face of such undeniable grace and strength. Naomi King felt the weight of the world on her shoulders, even as the applause began to fade and the tension in the Ashwood auditorium grew palpable once more. Ms. Harper, still wrestling with her own guilt and the remnants of her earlier cruelty, broke the silence with a hesitant compliment. She said, "Naomi, no matter what, I must admit that your performance has far exceeded all our expectations." Though her voice had softened, a trace of sternness still lingered, as if she were battling the ingrained prejudice that had blinded her for so long. The compliment stirred conflicting emotions in Naomi. Here she was, a young black girl who had poured every ounce of her heart into her music, now forced to confront the painful reality that even this victory might be tainted by the biases of those around her. Without missing a beat, Ms. Harper mentioned the name Juilliard, a name that sparked a mixture of disbelief and bitter irony in the room. "With such innate talent," she continued, "I think you should try your hand in a truly professional music environment. Have you ever heard of the Juilliard School?" The mere mention of this prestigious institution sent shockwaves through the audience. For decades, even the wealthiest students had seen Juilliard as a nearly unreachable dream, and now the suggestion that Naomi could audition there felt like a cruel twist of fate. Emily Walker's eyes widened with envy and anger as she regarded the proposal. her inner turmoil evident to anyone paying attention. Naomi's heart pounded in her chest as she recalled the long, lonely nights spent with her worn violin, dreaming of a stage far grander than the one she now occupied. Yet, when the moment came for her to respond, her voice trembled with both sorrow and resignation. "Thank you, Miss Harper," she said softly yet clearly, "but I don't think I can audition for Juilliard. I know my abilities and I understand my place. That school is too far out of reach for me. I don't belong there." Her words fell over the auditorium like a heavy curtain, leaving a silence filled with sympathy and the bitter sting of societal rejection. Then, from the back of the room, a deep, commanding voice cut through the quiet. Daniel Whitmore, a world-renowned violinist and proud Juilliard alumnist, stepped forward in a tailored dark blue suit. His presence commanded immediate attention as he introduced himself with warmth and authority. "My name is Daniel Whitmore, and I have witnessed many performances in my career, but today Naomi King's display of talent is among the rarest I have ever seen." He moved gracefully to Naomi's side, gently placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder as he continued, "True talent knows no boundaries of wealth or skin color. And if finances are your concern, I will cover all costs for your audition and training at Juilliard." Overwhelmed by a mixture of hope and anxiety, Naomi glanced toward her father, whose eyes shone with pride and quiet apprehension. Then, with a voice barely above a whisper yet filled with the gravity of her sacrifice, she asked, "Dad, I'm not sure if I should do this. If I agree, will it make things harder for you?" In that charged moment, as every eye in the auditorium fixed on her trembling figure, it became clear that Naomi's future and the possibility of mending deep, painful wounds inflicted by years of prejudice hung in the balance. Naomi King felt her heart swell with both fear and fierce determination as her father's gentle words wrapped around her like a warm blanket on a chilly evening in Iowa. "My daughter, all my life I have lived only to see you happy and successful," Robert King said, his deep, weathered voice trembling with emotion as tears streaked his lined cheeks. In that sacred moment, Naomi, who had endured years of relentless cruelty and bitter prejudice, felt a powerful surge of hope. She had always believed that her dreams might cost her father more than he could bear, but now his reassurance melted her fears. "Dad, I just want you to be proud," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the hushed murmurs of the auditorium. The room, once filled with judgment and scorn, now stood silent in the face of a father's unconditional love. Even Emily Walker, whose icy eyes had once held nothing but cruel amusement, now bowed her head as tears silently tracked down her cheeks, overwhelmed by the raw beauty of a father's sacrifice. As the heavy silence deepened, Daniel Whitmore, the renowned violinist whose reputation lit up concert halls from New York to Los Angeles, stepped forward with a dignified calm that made every heart in the room skip a beat. His polished dark blue suit and commanding presence lent an air of authority and compassion as he addressed Naomi with both respect and genuine warmth. "Naomi King, I agree with your father wholeheartedly," he declared, his rich baritone resonating in the vast space. "I promise you that I will do everything in my power to help you reach the heights of your talent." His words, imbued with the certainty of a man who had seen greatness in countless performances, ignited a spark within Naomi that battled against the lingering shadows of self-doubt. Applause erupted around them, a thunderous outpouring of admiration that transformed the auditorium into a temple of hope and possibility. Yet, even amid this jubilant crescendo, tension simmered beneath the surface. Daniel Whitmore's next words carried an invitation that promised to reshape Naomi's future. "If you both have a moment, I would like to show you the future you are meant for," he said, his tone gentle yet insistent. With that, he escorted Naomi and her proud yet anxious father to a sleek black car waiting under the fading glow of stage lights. As they rode through city streets that sparkled with the promise of a new dawn, Naomi sat in silent awe, the bitter memories of mockery and isolation slowly yielding to the possibility of transformation. Outside, American cityscapes unfurled like a cinematic panorama, each familiar landmark a silent witness to the unfolding miracle in her life. Minutes later, the car pulled up in front of a grand classical building that seemed to rise like a palace from the earth itself. A massive wrought iron gate bore an elegant golden inscription, Whitmore Conservatory. Naomi's eyes widened in disbelief as she stepped out onto the polished sidewalks, the air thick with both the scent of blooming magnolias and a palpable sense of destiny. Inside, the corridors glistened with white marble and walls adorned with portraits of legendary musicians, each image a reminder of the talent that had come before and the promise of greatness that awaited. It was in this hall of hallowed art that Naomi was to face not only the weight of her own dreams, but also the unyielding scorn of a world that had long deemed her unworthy. Soon, Daniel Whitmore led them to the office of the conservatory's principal, the formidable Margaret Sullivan, whose silver hair and steely gaze exuded both grace and an ironclad adherence to tradition. "Daniel, I hear you wish to introduce a special student to me today," she inquired, in a tone that was both measured and piercing. With unwavering conviction, Daniel replied, "Yes, Margaret. This is Naomi King, a young woman whose talent shines so brightly that it demands an exception to our usual rules." Principal Sullivan's eyes narrowed as she studied Naomi, whose hands trembled slightly as she clutched her old, battered violin. After a long pause that seemed to stretch into eternity, the stern principal softened ever so slightly. "Naomi, are you truly prepared to step into an environment as demanding as this?" she asked in a firm yet unexpectedly caring voice. Naomi's heart pounded like a freight train as she looked toward her father, whose eyes brimmed with silent encouragement. "Ma'am," she began hesitantly, "I know this is an opportunity beyond my wildest dreams, but I'm scared. I'm not sure I'm good enough, and I worry that accepting this might mean more sacrifice for my dad." Her confession hung in the air, heavy with the sorrow of a lifetime spent doubting her own worth. In a moment that stunned everyone present, Principal Sullivan's stern face broke into a rare, tender smile. "Naomi King, those who worry about their worth are the ones destined for greatness. You are an exception, and today I grant you a full scholarship to Whitmore Conservatory. You will not be held back by the limitations of your past or the prejudices of others." The room fell into a profound silence as Naomi's world shifted on its axis. The promise of a new future, so vivid and dazzling, collided with the harsh realities of the present. Overwhelmed by the magnitude of the moment, Naomi could barely stand as emotions surged through her like a tidal wave: joy, gratitude, and a lingering fear of the challenges that lay ahead. Yet just as hope began to blossom, the shadows of cruelty reasserted themselves. In the grand practice room of the conservatory, where sunlight streamed in through towering windows onto gleaming instruments, a hushed murmur rippled through the gathered students. Eyes once filled with wonder now flickered with judgment as a blonde girl with icy blue eyes sneered, "Oh, look who's here. It's the black girl who was specially favored by Whitmore. I wonder if her talent is real or just a publicity stunt." That girl was Clara Beaumont, the offspring of a powerful family in the art world, whose haughty demeanor and unyielding disdain for those of lesser means had become infamous. Naomi's stomach churned as she took her seat, her battered violin cradled like a precious relic in her arms. A few snickers and whispered comments passed between her classmates, their voices echoing the deep-seated prejudice that had plagued Naomi for years. As if the tension were not enough, the heavy oak door swung open to reveal Professor Thomas Callaghan, a tall, austere man in his 60s with a neatly trimmed silver beard that only accentuated his severe expression. Known throughout the conservatory for his relentless rigor and unbending standards, Professor Callaghan fixed his cold gaze upon Naomi. "Naomi King, please stand up," he commanded, in a voice as crisp and unforgiving as a winter wind. Startled, Naomi rose, her hands trembling as she clutched her violin. The professor stepped forward, snatched the instrument from her grasp, and examined it as though it were a relic of some long-forgotten era. With a heavy sigh that carried the weight of 1,000 disappointed expectations, he declared, "This violin does not meet the standards of this conservatory. I understand your circumstances, but here we do not tolerate exceptions born out of pity. If you want to prove yourself, you must do so solely through your talent and technique." His words struck Naomi like a barrage of icy daggers, each syllable deepening the wounds that years of discrimination had already inflicted upon her fragile spirit. Clara Beaumont's eyes sparkled with malicious satisfaction as she watched Naomi shrink back into her seat, her cheeks burning with humiliation. In the following days, Naomi found herself thrust into the most grueling regimen of practice she had ever experienced. Professor Callaghan's methods were as harsh as they were unforgiving, his criticisms slicing through her resolve with every mistake she made. "Perhaps you were hyped up too early," he would sneer in front of the class whenever a note faltered. "I see nothing special in you, only fleeting emotion and a lack of discipline." Each remark, laden with condescension and overt racial disdain, served to reinforce the cruel reality that Naomi had long battled. The once hopeful melody of her dreams now echoed with the bitter sound of oppression. Yet, amidst the relentless drills and soul-crushing exercises, a quiet flame of rebellion began to kindle within her heart. Late one autumn evening, as the chill wind rattled the window panes of her modest dorm room, Naomi sat alone with her violin. The instrument, scarred by years of neglect and abuse, seemed to whisper secrets of a better future. A future where she would rise above the cruelty and reclaim her dignity. In that solitary moment, the pain transformed into a fierce determination for retribution. She vowed that one day she would not only prove her worth, but would do so in a way that left her oppressors speechless and the world in awe. That promise, born of hardship and fueled by the injustice she had endured, marked the turning point in Naomi King's life. As the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months, her resolve hardened like tempered steel. She practiced relentlessly, channeling every ounce of sorrow, every spark of anger, and every drop of hope into her music. And then, on a crisp winter morning, when the first light of dawn touched the frosted windows of Whitmore Conservatory, Naomi stepped onto the stage for a performance that would forever alter the course of her destiny. In that moment, as she lifted her battered violin to her shoulder and drew the bow across the strings, the echoes of Professor Callaghan's derision and Clara Beaumont's sneers faded into oblivion. The notes that poured forth were not merely music, they were a declaration of defiance, a resounding anthem of victory over years of prejudice and pain. The entire auditorium fell silent, the oppressive air shattered by the raw power of her performance. And in that breathtaking instant, as tears of both sorrow and triumph mingled on her cheeks, Naomi King transformed from a downtrodden girl into an unstoppable force, a living testament to the indomitable spirit of those who dare to dream despite the odds. The retribution was as grand as it was unexpected. For the first time in her life, Naomi was no longer the subject of pity or scorn. She was the embodiment of resilience, and her music carried a promise of change so potent that even the most hardened hearts could not help but be moved. Naomi King felt the sting of prejudice every time Professor Callaghan's remarks pierced her heart, leaving a deep ache that no talent could soothe. Each cutting comment and cruel whisper from Clara and wealthy peers eroded her self-confidence, forcing lonely nights in her modest dorm where she clutched her worn violin as her only friend. Yet amid despair, Naomi recalled her father James Carter's proud gaze and Daniel Whitmore's encouraging words, fueling a silent promise never to yield. In an empty practice room, she persisted, repeating complex techniques until her delicate fingers bled from tiny cuts and exhaustion mingled with tears. From a distant corner, Professor Callaghan watched her with cold scrutiny that slowly gave way to reluctant admiration. Though his stern expression softened briefly, his criticisms stung like icy needles. Naomi understood that the challenges at Whitmore Conservatory were intensifying. She vowed every drop of sweat and every tear would transform into strength and artistry. The weight of her past propelled her determination to shatter the oppressive forces that had long tried to silence her, promising a magnificent retribution that would leave her detractors speechless and prove that true talent and resilience could overcome any barrier beyond all doubt. Naomi King stood on the stage, her heart pounding as brightly as the American marquee lights overhead. Tomorrow was not just another performance, it was the moment to shatter every hateful expectation. Professor Callaghan, his usually harsh tone softened by genuine care, told her, "Tomorrow you stand not for those who doubted you, but to prove your strength." His rare words gave Naomi the courage to push aside memories of sneers from Clara Beaumont and the bitter insults of Mr. Reynolds, who now sat in the audience, his eyes full of regret. As Naomi lifted her battered violin, each note told the story of a poor, determined girl who refused to be broken by racism and cruelty. Her music swelled with raw emotion, transforming her past of exclusion into a triumphant symphony that left every heart in the hall spellbound. The thunderous applause that followed was not merely praise, it was a resounding declaration that talent and perseverance conquer all barriers. In that moment, even Mr. Reynolds, once a symbol of prejudice, felt his rigid views crumble, replaced by remorse and admiration. Daniel Whitmore's announcement that Naomi was now a special prospective candidate for international performance programs sealed her victory. Naomi King had not only silenced her critics, but ignited hope for a future where every person is judged by the strength of their spirit